And so when you think about it, that's not a massive company. I think at that revenue range, they were doing about a million in EBITDA or so, maybe a little under. That's not a bad deal. That's not a huge business. But so it doesn't take forever to get to that point if you build it the right way. But again, that's not a $5 million business. That was at least a 10.
A lot of times, first time buyers, you get really sucked into this idea of like, do I want to buy or build? Like, well, it sounds so easy. Of course I want to buy. I'm buying customers, I'm buying revenue, I'm skipping the 0 to 1 phase. Why would I not do that? And the one big reason why you may not want to do that is because you're buying more than just customers and revenue. You're buying culture. Planning on from the beginning means what right looks like when you go to market, when you go to sell. So your first conversation should probably be with PE groups who are actively buying in that space, but more importantly, probably investment bankers in the lower middle market who handle these transactions regularly. And they can tell you, look, if you're buying a plumbing company, and this is what it needs to look like if it's going to be marketable and it's actually going to sell.
Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Jed Morris. He is a managing partner with Sunset Coast Partners, and we're going to talk all things mergers and acquisitions. Thank you for being here, Jed, fellow military veteran, fellow Air Force veteran, and we're going to have a good time having a conversation today.
That's right, Ron. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to chat with a fellow Air Force veteran.
So I'm a little older than you. I probably was in and out before you ever made it in. I got out of the military in 97. Yeah, so 97. So
yeah, we missed each other just by a little bit. I enlisted in August of 08.
08, okay. Yeah, so no, I was in from 92 to 97. I did about 5.5 years. I was only going to do one term, get my GI Bill, and then they did this weird thing where they gave me orders to go to Hawaii for 3 years, and I had to extend to take them. I'm like, I'm taking that. So I went to Hawaii and did my college while I was there. So yeah, but so you we have a similar path. We were both in. We kind of did stuff. I imagine from reading your profile, some of the stuff you did had security clearances and stuff too.
Yeah,
mine did. And then I got out and I went into the software world. I went to defense contracting and then .com. You kind of just jumped straight into the tech side of it, right? So, and then somehow we both ended up in this mergers and acquisitions space. So, just means we're both intelligent, right? So.
That's all it means. All this intro is just a way to tell the audience how smart we are. That's all it is.
Let's give everybody a little bit more insight about you and who you are, and how you got here, because that's gonna get them to listen to the rest of the show, right? If they know who you are and kind of why you're here and why you want to help people, that'll build a little bond. So let's just do our normal thing where we do the origin story so we can get that out of the way. How did you end up on a show about buying and selling companies, man?
Yeah, I mean, well, what you said, 10 years in the Air Force, got out in 2019, did my MBA at NYU Stern, did the executive program, excellent opportunity, but then got a job offer at Microsoft. To join as a software developer. No tech background. I absolutely took that. The big thing is because I did a lot of work on the top secret classified side when I was doing Air Force work. And so at the time, Microsoft was building out their federal cloud. And so they were having a terrible time trying to find software engineers who could qualify for top secret clearances. And so their thought was, why don't we just hire a bunch of vets who already have the clearance and teach them how to code? And so I was one of the first in their cohort in 2020 to do that. And so I spent my pandemic days, learning how to code, from scratch. Stayed at Microsoft for 2 years, had a wonderful time. Transitioned to AWS and HP as a technical program manager, working with software teams. I kind of found out about the acquisition space on accident. NYU, this was in, I finished in 2021, and this was before it was cool online to buy a business, right? Like
Right.
social media was not talking about it. We were talking about crypto, And so I was reading through an entrepreneurial finance book, and there was a spot in there that talked about lower middle market multiples, and something just clicked. I was like, wait a second, people buy these things? And so that led to attending the HBS conference that year, to attending the Chicago conference the following year, and just kind of learning everything from scratch, through the conferences, through networking with other searchers, and just kind of figuring out as I go, read, buy, then build, read the HBR guide, kind of put all the pieces together. It's like, cool, I'm going to do the self-funded search. And so I kind of started my self-funded search while I was still working in big tech, which is a great thing I tell self-funded searchers to do, because you don't want to quit your job. You're not getting paid. You don't want to add that kind of deal pressure. And so learn how to search on your own time, be as efficient as possible. Originally started looking in defense and aerospace, since that's where all my background was, and tech as well. Could not find anything that made sense as a SBA loan for that kind of acquisition. And so ended up pivoting into landscaping. Met a lot of contacts, got comfortable with the space, met a few owners that I really liked. And long story short, I spent almost a year and a half, almost 2 years, like searching for a business. Ultimately closed on one business in San Diego, which then turned into a second acquisition only about a month later. Merged the two, and things were going okay for a little while until ultimately they failed 8 months later, which left me with nearly $1 million in personally guaranteed debt. And so that was a learning experience. It was a lot. And then summer of last year, I kind of emerged from, basically the cave I fell into of like after something like that happens. And I went online and I started seeing all of this information about, buy a business with nothing down, 100% seller financing. It's the cheat code to generational wealth, passive income, all the BS you see online. And I just started rage posting because I was like, having experienced the personal guarantee myself, I was like, this is insane. And then that started resonating with people. And then the thing I didn't expect, though, was that as I started, my wife, she sees me posting on LinkedIn and she's like, are you spitting truth? I was like, yes, baby, I'm spitting truth. But then, I didn't expect that other owners, who had experienced a bankruptcy, would reach out. And I don't know why. I just kind of assumed I was one of the only people who had experienced it, because nobody talks about this in this space. And as a result, like I knew, like intellectually, there must have been other people who had failed, but I did not expect that I would ever meet them, or much less there'd be a lot of them. And so one by one, I started getting DMs from people who had experienced something similar, who, like me, couldn't talk about the details because of non-disclosure agreements and non-disparagement agreements and settlements. But we started comparing notes, and that led to a passion project, which is writing this book, Buyer Beware, which is a compilation of all of these stories, anonymized, to protect the person involved, but also to get the key lessons out there for new self-funded searchers to, kind of see what happens when things don't go well, when things don't go to plan, and hopefully avoid some of the major pitfalls.
Yeah, I've met all the guys. I've interviewed most of them, right? And while I know people, I've met people, I've interviewed people who have successfully done low down, no down deals. Most of the time, it's for partial equity. It's they call WIBO, work for equity type of thing, where they come in and do consulting for a piece of the company. I know it exists, and it's a little less risk because you're not taking the personal guarantees and stuff like that. It's one of the reasons these guys pitch it. But it is definitely what I refer to as a unicorn hunt. You're going to have to talk to 10 times more business owners to get one done, 50 times, 100 times sometimes, where your average search funder, somebody who has a backing, has credit, maybe has a down payment or has a source of down payment, somebody's going to invest in him, they schedule 24, 36 months to do their search.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
You've just complicated that, and you're going to have to, deal flow is the key in that. I always tell people, if you really think you're going to get a zero down or no down or low down deal, you better focus and be the best deal flow guy you can get. You're going to have to talk. You're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs.
Yeah, and not only that, it's that a lot of the things that are pitched, the scary thing is that they're 100% possible. Like you can find a good business with 100% seller financing that's not, a terrible deal, and the seller really does just like you that much. It is possible. It's incredibly rare. and then everything else is true as well. You can find zero down deals, you can find this kind of stuff, but what you don't talk about is the risk profile in those deals. And
Right.
there's one reason why they're so rare is because the risk is so high. It is exponentially higher than what you would have found otherwise on the market.
And the reason that it's zero down is usually one of the big D's, right? Divorce,
Yeah,
death,
exactly.
disease. If it's not one of those and they're trying to hand it to you, buyer beware.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we know that the vast majority of businesses change hands due to death, disease, divorce, distress, right? And if you're a first-time buyer, the riskiest acquisition you'll ever make is your first one because you don't know what you're doing. There's all this information you don't have. There's the experience of running a business that you don't have. And then you're going to take all of that and compound it with a business that's in distress. That's insane. That
I
is
hear
absolutely insane.
there's an ego aspect to entrepreneurs, and it hurts them so bad. I hear this all the time where I call people out on it. Like, look, one guy, he's a Harvard grad, and he's in one of my hangouts. I have about 150 people that hang out in the chat room, and then we meet twice a month. About 30 or 40 of them will show up, and we're brainstorming and helping people get over any hurdles. That's all. The whole goal is meet potential JV partners, and if you're stuck somewhere, a lot of the guests from the show come to this twice a month hangout. Somebody's there that can answer your question. There's no reason to leave that hour and a half meeting stuck, right? And guy comes on there. He's just graduated Harvard. He has an MBA. He's a funded search, and he's very Ivy, right? Got the vest on and everything.
Yeah.
And he tells me he's going to buy this $5 million landscaping and construction type of. They do heavy landscaping, like bobcats, and they move stuff. I'm like, no, you're not. You're a fucking idiot if you do that. Excuse my language, but that's exactly what I said to him. And he's like, oh, how dare you talk to me like that? I said, that's exactly why. I did it on purpose. That's exactly why. You're dealing with some redneck, blue-collar workers out there who have never dealt with Ivy. And you're going to show up in your pretty little vest, and they're going to eat you alive, especially if you just got offended by me saying the F word, right? And I said, you're walking into a culture you don't understand. And,
well, to your very point, like if you're talking about acquiring a landscaping company, I have a little bit of experience there. And let's assume like you walk in there. Well, one, who's your license holder? Because it's not you, because you don't have a landscaping license. Almost every state requires one. So someone else has got a lot of authority in your business that's not you. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, the vast majority of your employees, well over 65% of them, don't even have a checking account or an email address. How are you doing payroll? Like, there's all these little things that we haven't talked through. One of the things that caught me off guard was I would run payroll, and then I'd be, processing the next payroll cycle, and there were outstanding payroll checks that hadn't cleared. I'm like, what are we doing with all this uncleared money? And it turned out that a lot of our employees would hold on to the payroll check and just hold on to it like it was a savings account. And then whenever they needed it, they'd go down to like the local liquor store and cash it. And so there's so many nuances. You're exactly right. It's a completely different environment than coming from that Ivy League perspective. And you can take that same kind of culture shock and you can apply it to anybody coming from like a corporate background and say, oh, I'm going to go buy an HVAC business. I'm going to go buy a roofing company. You really need to sit down and think hard about the kind of environment you're putting yourself in. And you absolutely can be successful, but you do need to adjust the way you live your life a little bit and be a little bit more conscious of what you're getting yourself involved in.
Yeah, he wouldn't come on the show, and I won't say his name because I don't have permission, but I know a gentleman in Dallas who bought an 90 person moving company, right? They had 90 employees. He's a stock trader, very New York type, three-piece suit guy, right?
Yeah.
First thing he does is he buys a new office to go for his moving company because it was a real dirty, grimy place he was working in. And then he shows up in his three-piece suit and draws all these 80 employees into this boardroom that has this big oak table and stuff. And within 6 months, he's trying to sell this thing because they ate him alive, right? Yeah. He didn't know how to deal with their culture, right? He didn't know how to even communicate with people who like don't show up drinking or all the different things that happens when you're dealing with a different culture and different environment, and people think they can get away with something, right? Yeah, and he got the old business owner. He's like, I got the old business on their phone, and he's like, they never showed up drunk for me. I was like, yeah, because they couldn't push him around.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he
Yeah,
needs a
it's a
culture.
learning curve. It's an
Yeah.
ownership learning curve. It's like, on one aspect, you're learning how to be the owner, how to own the P&L, how to really make strategic decisions.
Mhm.
Because it's not just the employees. You have to engage with the vendors, the suppliers, the customers, and there's a certain culture in each of these types of industries that you need to be a part of. And just like anything else, like if you don't fit into the culture, you're going to be kicked out of it, and people aren't going to take you seriously. Well, see, that's one thing you just touched on that a lot of first-time buyers don't really understand, especially if they're coming from that corporate background, because they think, they've read the books, and so they know that they want to work on the business, not in the business. But
Mhm.
what they don't understand is that even if you buy on the high side of the SBA range, like the $5 million EV company, that business is already the smallest business in the market. Like we're at the very tiniest portion of the market.
Yeah.
And when you do that, there's no such thing as not working in the business. Like it is owner-operated businesses. And so, and especially if you're the one taking on a personal guarantee for the debt to buy that business, you're not going to just give that to a manager and be like, oh, okay, it's fine. I'll check in with you every once in a while, because they have no incentive. They have no skin in the game on that.
Yeah.
And so, I hope, for every one of your buyers, like I hope we get to the point to where, we have management in place and you're kind of removed a little bit from the day to day and you can be more like that chairman role. But that is not the job you're buying. That is not what's happening. You have to be able to get in there and roll up your sleeves. And one of the risk factors is from the moment you buy the company, how long is it going to take you to actually roll up your sleeves and do the work? Not that you should be the guy or gal doing the work all the time, but you have to be able to know how to do it.
Right.
You need to understand what is involved and at least have a little experience doing it yourself.
You see these no down, low down guys, and I'm friends with them, so I don't want to offend any of them. I'm friends with Jeremy. I'm friends with Roland Frazier. I've had Carl Allen on here two, three different times. They're great guys, don't get me wrong, and they do these deals. And they teach people. The people that they're teaching, they're getting those deals done. But one of the things that they, kind of, they like to, it's marketing hype is what I call it. They oversimplify that you can just buy a company and bring it down their operator in and they'll run it. Yeah, and you better be able to run it until you get that guy. A lot of people,
Yeah.
what they don't tell you is an executive search can take 6 months to 18 months if you're good at it, right?
If you're good at it.
If the company can afford a good operator,
Yeah.
to find one, you might end up, it might take you 6 to 18 months to place one, and then you might have to replace him in 2 years or a year because he's not the right one, right?
Well, yeah. And then what happens if that person goes on vacation or gets sick or finds a better job? Like all those things, those are normal things that happen when you have an employee. And make no mistake, your operator is an employee. And so you have to be able, you can't just step away and pretend like you're not involved anymore. It just doesn't work.
There is a point, and it's not in this SBA loan realm, where a company is big enough where you can be an outside investor, acquire it, and have it run. Family offices do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that point somewhere in that $10 million to $20 million revenue, above $5 million in EBITDA range, to where if somebody leaves, you can bring a consulting team in really quick to implement. You have the money to overspend and pay twice the spot until you get a placement, right?
You can definitely get there, and I was under LOI with a landscaping company at one point that they were doing just under 10 million in revenue. They had 35 employees, an additional 110 contractors, commercial maintenance, and it was a two-owner team, had been splitting up for decades, like 30 plus years at this point, and both of them were largely removed from operations. They had built a pretty decent team of managers and foremen who were running most of the show, and they were kind of overseeing the thing, but they weren't like neck deep in it anymore. And so when you think about it, that's not a massive company. I think at that revenue range, they were doing about a million in EBITDA or so, maybe a little under. That's not a bad deal. That's not a huge business. But so it doesn't take forever to get to that point if you build it the right way. But again, that's not a $5 million business. That was at least a 10.
And people they don't see this. The other thing I want to run by you, because I think you might have the same viewpoint or have a lot to put in this. Too many people get in this business thinking they're going to buy a company that's been up and running for 30 years, step in it and run it better than the guy that just left there and have been doing it for 30 years because they have some, like me, I have an MBA in marketing. Well, I'm going to be better at marketing than the other guy. Yes and no, right? You can be better at creating ads, but will they work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be better at, copywriting, but, can you get it in front of the right people? There's just so many movable factors. I keep telling people, quit looking for something you can improve upon and paying full value for, and look for something that has enough margin that you have a learning room, you have room to learn, right? That's why I like online stuff, remote managed stuff, and stuff with like newsletters and stuff. I look for because they usually have 70-80% profit margins. I have room to make some mistakes, right? I have some room to learn. You go out and buy a company that's got a 5% profit margin and you're the new CEO, you better have some deep pockets to cover the months you screw up. And
Yep, exactly. You have to assume it's going to, like, just in the turmoil of the transition, you have to assume you're going to drop profitability 10, 15%. I mean, that's just life.
yeah,
And you're right. I mean, I think every first time buyer, and again, it goes back to what you said earlier about having that ego, which I obviously did as well. Like we all do, I think. But we all look at these companies and we're like, look, it's 30 plus years old. Look at all the things I could do. Their website sucks. Their email marketing sucks or doesn't exist. They have no Google ads. They have no Facebook ads. Their customers are paying via check, like physical check in the mail. Like we can turn that into Stripe and CRM invoicing. And there's all these, we'll call low-hanging fruit. And man, look at how I could improve the profit margins like within the first 6 months. And the truth is that yeah, it is. Those are things that you can change, and it can drive value. But like you said, there is a lot of value already there in the fact that the owner's been doing this for 30 years, and they have a lot of insight knowledge into how the industry actually works and how they position their business. And if you think that you're just going to get in there and turn on some Facebook ads and all of a sudden blow up the business, you obviously don't know what you're doing. But then the second piece of that is change management is a whole professional space in of itself.
I was just going to say there are entire sections of libraries and
exactly
dedicated to the resistance to change, the psychological impact of change, who moved my cheese, right?
To your employees, to your customers, like that physical check thing. That's something I actually encountered myself. Like 90% of our employees would mail in a check every month, and so I'm like, hey guys, we're going to start doing digital invoicing, and I kid you not, the vast majority of the customers are like, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. That feels like, is this real? Is that scammy? I'm like, you buy stuff on Amazon. What are we talking about? Like, it's a digital invoice. You just click the button, put in your credit card, you're done. Set up auto payments, attach it to your bank, whatever. And these weren't residential customers. They were HOAs. Like, why am I having this conversation? And it's exactly what you said. It's that inertia, that resistance to change. Like, no, we just write a check. It's fine. We'll just send it to you because for them it's like, yeah, sure, I wrote a check, but at least my money's not clearing today. It's going to take you a day in the mail, a week for it to clear the bank. That's your problem, not mine. And I'm like, yeah, that is my problem. That's exactly why I want this to change.
That said, if you have a landscaping or something like that, you got to learn the cycles of it. If you're I looked at a company where like they got 90% of their income between Thanksgiving and Christmas because their product was mostly given out as gifts, right? And they're trying to sell it in January and going, look how good we are running.
Yeah.
Right? Look at our last 3 months. Look how good that
is. We evened out cash flows for the full 12 months, so you can see what it looks like.
Yeah. And you're thinking, great, and you're wanting to leave this with zero cash. I got to employ employees for 7 months before we get our first real good month. You got to plan for that stuff. And all businesses, I don't care what they are. I don't care if you're a bakery or you're a landscaping company or our pest control company. So,
well, that actually speaks to one of the number one questions I get from searchers, which is, what industries do you recommend that are safer? And I tell people, I'm like, there's really no such thing as like safer industries. They all just have their own set of pros and cons. And overall, some can be a little bit healthier, but they all just have pros and cons. Right now, HVAC has been really popular for the last several years. One of the big cons right now is because it's so popular, the multiples are incredibly high. So what are you really getting? You're not getting the return that you thought you were getting. And so that's one of the big cons. But I encourage people to look across industries and, if possible, find something that's at least tangentially related to something you've already done, some sort of experience you have. Because it's really hard. Like, you do see stories of people being successful, going like completely industry shifting, but it really does make a difference if you can buy something that you have some experience in. So, for instance, a few weeks ago, I spoke with someone who just bought a company, and he used to be an employee at Amazon. A technical employee, but not like a software engineer, but knew his way around some technology. But he was originally looking at roofing companies. And he told me, he was like, yeah, I'm looking at roofing companies. I have no experience in that space, but my father-in-law is a roofer. And so there's a little bit of connection. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I'm like, at least you have a trusted person who can help guide you along. I'm not opposed to that. But then he was like, I just didn't really feel comfortable with it. I didn't really understand it. And then later on he found an MSP provider, an IT provider for local businesses, and he was like, this made a lot more sense. He was like, I've never been an IT person, I've never done administrative services, but at least I understood what was happening, and I got into it. I was able to learn relatively fast, and so that's a great example of something where you don't have direct experience, but you have tangential experience, which can really help you feel comfortable in the business a lot faster.
If you think you're going to buy it, sell it to PE firm, and exit it in 3 to 4 years, it has to be bought that way. You have to buy something in an industry. You have to forecast what they're going to be buying 3 or 4 years from now. They might be out of heat and air companies by then, or they might be, because they move around, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. There's always going to be somebody doing something, right? That said, it has to be done by size, by design. And if you buy a company that's mostly operated by a couple of operators and it's not already well documented, well financed, all the financials are perfect. If they're not all perfect and there's not standard operating procedures, not systems in place, you have to be that guy, because that's what the PE firm likes. And most people aren't that person. They're not somebody who can go in and say, okay, here's a good running company that's just all the employees know what to do and they know how to train other employees how to do it. And take that something and okay, we can put that into documents, into Loom videos, and other stuff, and we can bring anybody off the street, and within 2 months they can be doing this, right?
And even beyond that, they're not, like you said, they're not planning on it from the beginning. And planning on it from the beginning means you know what right looks like when you go to market, when you go to sell. So your first conversation should probably be with PE groups who are actively buying in that space, but more importantly, probably investment bankers in the lower middle market who handle these transactions regularly. And they can tell you, look, if you're buying a plumbing company and this is what it needs to look like if it's going to be marketable and it's actually going to sell. That way you actually have a scorecard to measure against. Otherwise, you're flying blind. And I guarantee the vast majority of buyers, they haven't even thought about that. They haven't even thought about that kind of exit. But even if they have and they're kind of dreaming of it, guarantee that they don't have a scorecard. They're not actually looking at it and saying, all right, well, within the next 3 to 5 years, these are the boxes I have to be able to check. And what's my plan for checking those boxes? Understanding that even if I check all those boxes 5 years from now, the industry may have shifted and now no one's buying. Or the market may fall out from under me and now no one's buying. There's so many things that can happen. Those are the inherent risks. But if you don't at least have a scorecard, then you don't even have to worry about the inherent risk. You're just not even building for the actual sale.
And you're not even just building an initial scorecard. The real way to get this done, and I know people doing it, and I know people have done it. The real way it has to be done is you build those relationships with investment bankers, you PE firms and stuff. In the early phase, you build almost mentoring relationships where, look, I'm buying these companies. My goal is eventually sell it to a guy like you. And this should be even tech companies. If you're building a company you think Google might work, you should work at the product. You should call around and find product managers and stuff over at those companies you think might buy and have those conversations. Hey, I'm building this. I'm going to run it for 3 or 4 years. I eventually love to sell it to you. What would that take? What would you have to see inside of it? And their job is to acquire companies. They lose their job if they can't. So they have a vested interest in seeing you grow into something they can acquire. So they're going to give you some information. Don't expect them to spend hundreds of hours with you, but they're going to lead you in the right way and point you in the right direction. But it's an ongoing relationship. Like you said, the market changes, things shift. If you got an investment banker that told you how to buy plumbing companies and sell it to PE firms when it hits $2 million in EBITDA, you better have that conversation at $500K EBITDA, at $1 million EBITDA, at 1.5 million, and just like, what's changing? What do I need to do now? Here's what I've got. What do you recommend, right? What's the red flags that these investors are looking for now, right? Is it customer concentration? Is it tariffs, or, am I not going to be able to sell for the next couple of years until this tariff stuff, evens out? What is it, right?
And who's the buyer? Is it really a financial buyer or is it a strategic buyer? Like those types of buyers like to see different things,
Yeah.
Is this something that can be easily bolted onto the platform I'm already operating? Or is it something that is going to be my new platform?
Yeah.
Those two businesses look fundamentally different.
I met a tech company, and I was looking at it. I was interested, and he's like, "You know what? I'm not. I'll talk to you, but I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm going to sell this thing to Microsoft." And I was like, "No, you're not." I said, "Why?" I said, "Because you don't use any of their tech stack. You're not even close. You have such a custom tech stack. You're going to be a pain in their butt to acquire. They might want your customers, but your customers are used to, the output from your tech stack. So if you think you're going to sell it to somebody in the Microsoft world, you probably ought to switch your tech stack up, right? If they're running on Linux and Unix because it was cheaper, right, or Linux and FreeBSD or whatever is out there these days, but they were not a Microsoft tech stack at all. They're like me. I'm anti-Microsoft. I'm on Mac equipment. If I have to touch a PC, I put Linux on it, right? Ubuntu. I don't touch it. I'm just not interested. To whereas you're on the other side of the fence, right? You really know the Microsoft world. You're comfortable in that world, right? I would never buy a tech company that I had expectations to sell it to somebody who runs on Microsoft platforms because I don't know how to build what they need.
And not just that, you also think of like, what is the value that this company is bringing? Because if, like, for instance, if you're going to sell to Microsoft, it's probably a lot easier for them just to basically rebuild what you have in their stack and add it to the Office suite, if that is something that they actually wanted to do. That's why you didn't see Microsoft buying Slack. They built Teams, whereas Amazon bought Slack.
Right. The other side of that is your team has a lot to do with that, right? A lot of times they do what's called acquihire, right? They acquire because they want the human intelligence you have. So if you can attract some really high level players, right, then that becomes part of your strategic edge. I remember even when I was in defense contracting, we all had to do profiles and workups and stuff because part of our bidding on defense contracts, in particular, especially very classified contracts, was who was on our team, right? We had a couple of like really high end MIT level geniuses on our team that the government would contract their time. They would literally write a contract, say we need. I'll give. He's passed on now, but there's a guy named Peter. I won't give you his last name, but he ended up with brain cancer and passed away. But brilliant computer security guy. The government used to reach out on a regular basis, and so we need to contract out 30 hours of Peter's time, and Lockheed would be like, fine, it's at this rate, and they're like, okay, right? That there's a strategic advantage to individuals too. So part of what those companies like Microsoft and Google and stuff are buying is they're buying the team, and will the team stay, right? And then the other side is if you either have to have one of three things to be a strategic. You have to have a team they can't recruit themselves, and that they think will stay once they're in. That's the other side of that one, right? You have a market segment they're having a hard time breaking into. Or you have to have solved a tech problem that they don't want to invest the money to solve. It's just cheaper for them to buy you instead of doing it themselves. So if you don't have one of those, you're in the tech space. And the same thing goes with strategic purchases in almost every other realm. You're either in a market that they're having a hard time breaking into. Maybe you've dominated the Tulsa market for pest control, all right? And a PE firm wants you because they want, they've already got Oklahoma City and they want Tulsa, but they don't want to go against you. It's just cheaper to buy you, right? That said, there's got to be some reason there, and it isn't because I've got $2 million in EBITDA, right? They can throw in a marketing and money ad spend to do that fast enough. If you don't have one of the strategic blockers, either technology, staff, or market share. So
yeah, and with these types of businesses, the home services type businesses, your strategic leverage is going to be in your staff, the culture and staff that you've built over a certain amount of time, as well as the market. So, and how dominant you are in your local market. Because you're right, you want somebody to want to buy you because you've got the best team and you dominate a certain market. That's it. Beyond that, it's really hard. It's really hard to to get an advantage on the software side, especially in this kind of industry, because we're all using the same stuff.
I was using the same tag.
No one has an in-house developer team building custom software.
And we're all leaning on ChatGPT and all these other AI tools to speed it up now, right? I've talked to a guy who he sold his software. He did custom software to high-level Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, enterprise software, like making Salesforce talk to this. Integration glue is what I would refer to it as. He had 80-something employees in the Philippines, and that's what they did. They spent 60-hour, his average employee time was 50 to 60-hour weeks, and they would write code for these big companies to make software talk to each other, right? He couldn't get the big guys to move into the AI world fast enough, so he sold his business to his business partner, and now he says he does a little bit smaller markets, say the Fortune 1000s instead of the Fortune 100s and 500s, and he has 8 people writing the same number of lines of code per week as it took 80 people to write, and they're doing 30-hour weeks instead of 60. And that's because he's only hiring people that are AI augmented. They're still staff level software engineers, but they know how to use AI to speed up their work. And
Can you
he's
imagine what that did to his profitability?
oh my God, right? So he said he's already doing more revenue, no, sorry, more profit than the company sold to his business partner. And now the other guy's seeing the light and trying to figure out. But he said the problem with the bigger one is getting this Fortune 100 and 500 to change their ways, the resistance to change, right? A lot of them are concerned about letting AI that's not in house that they control see any of their data. So
Yeah, and that's actually a really good learning. Whether you're a Fortune 100 company or you're, Joe's plumbing shop, is that resistance to change is very real.
yeah,
And
it
so,
is.
a lot of times, first time buyers, you get really sucked into this idea of like, do I want to buy or build? Like, well, it sounds so easy. Of course I want to buy. I'm buying customers, I'm buying revenue, I'm skipping the 0 to 1 phase. Why would I not do that? And the one big reason why you may not want to do that is because you're buying more than just customers and revenue. You're buying culture. Like when you buy something that's already built, you can't just turn that ship in like 2 3 months. It takes time. It takes time for you to actually get a really good understanding of what you actually bought, and so you can get your arms around the full problem, which could take quite a while. And then from there, all right, well then now how do I build the culture within the team that reflects how I want to run the business? And then how do I actually start making those changes? And it takes a long time. It's certainly not the nimbleness of a startup where you get to dictate terms from the very beginning. And so that's the trade-off. That's the big trade-off that you're missing. And a lot of people really discount that because they look at the financials and like, oh well, culture is just whatever. And I would argue vehemently that culture is far more important. Financials simply get you in the door. Like that's table stakes to play. But the culture determines like what you can do with it, if you're going to survive. Like everything else is on culture.
I've turned away more than one because of culture. This story's been on the show quite a few times. There was an engineering firm in Dallas, and the guy, we're on the phone and on Zoom call. Somebody comes in and says something to him, and he just loses it, kicks the trash can across the room. It looked like the exorcist got a hold of him. He's cursing, his head spinning, he's throwing shit. He's just lost it. And I was like, okay, that was awkward. So when he got back there, he's like, okay, I think we got that under control. I mean, where were we? And we had the meeting. The second meeting, something similar happened. He did the same thing. And I just told him, said, look, I'm not interested in your company, and I don't know anybody that can be. And he says, well, you seem pretty interested. Our numbers are right. What's going on? I said, I can't manage the way you manage. You've built a culture around there that anybody would talk. And he got mad at me and started cussing at me. It's like, look, you're going to listen to me or you can hang up. That's what we're going to do right here. But I'm going to say what I've got to say. And I said, anybody who could deal with the way you manage has to be managed the way you manage. That's why they're still there, right? They can't work anywhere else. They need to be yelled at. They need stuff thrown at them. Otherwise, they wouldn't tolerate you. I said, and unfortunately, I have stepped into a position where I got brought in as a senior director, where the previous manager was kind of like that, and people would come in with their head all down, sheepish, and go, "I think we've got an outage." I was like, "What? Speak up!" Like they're waiting for something to fly at them, and like it's just really hard to change that culture. And so I already know that, and I had to let go. I had like 9 people. There's a small company. I had like 9 people. I had 3 of them I had to swap out because they couldn't be managed at, and they didn't do anything unless they were yelled at. And I don't yell, right? I've got anger management issues. I don't want to yell at you because then I just like become a really ugly person, and I'll be that guy, and I don't want to be that guy. I do have a dark side. We all have a dark side, and I don't want to see mine very often, right? I reserve that when somebody's messing with my kids. That said, other than that, there's this side of businesses that people don't get. That is, the culture has to be there, and there's the environment that I don't even know how to put it there. You're going to come in and make changes. Everybody there's so resistant to changes. And one of the biggest things I tell people all the time is you walk in the door, the first thing you really should do is spend 30, 60, maybe even 90 days just watching how things operate and not making a damn not one change, right? And then pull every single employee and say, if you could change anything, what would you change? And then in your mind, you already have your list of things you think should be changed. Start lining them up with the things they think should be changed, and do those things first, because then you build your trust and rapport, because these people don't know you from Adam at this stage, right? In that first 30, 60 days, they're getting to know you, right? And to make changes right away is just so disruptive. But if the changes you start with are ones they've been wanting to do for a long time, now you build a little trust and rapport. They see those things work, and you can make some of the other changes need to happen when you got everybody on board. And I see people doing this thing where they just come in gung ho, wanting to change everything. And we talked to a guy who bought a software company in South Africa, had 21 employees. Within 3 weeks of being there, every single one of them quit. He's doing $6-7 million a year, right? And went to zero because 21 employees quit on him, right? Well, the last manager owner was sick for years. Never came to the office, let them do what they wanted to, and they just chugged along. And he came in and wanted to, we got to have change management and strict protocols for when, like all this stuff. And these guys are just really senior engineers and just knew what to do and kept their job was to keep all these little companies they had as clients up and running, but they didn't have any other rules than that, right? And he's trying to implement all these tools and change management and quality control, and brought a quality control engineer in and just all this stuff, and they're like, I'm out of here, right?
I think you're speaking to one of the other big differences, when it comes to business acquisition, which is a lot of times I hear people talk about businesses in relation to real estate. And like, well, first and foremost, that's a bad analogy, because with real estate, there's a hard asset behind it, right? It actually has a tangible value in some way. So with a business, there's no real tangible value there. Like, even if you take the most high CapEx businesses out there, manufacturing, commercial landscaping, lots of machinery, lots of trucks, all of that stuff together is usually less than 5% the actual value of the company. Like, it's the salvage value. And so when the business, when it goes under, it's because, there's nothing left to get. It's all gone. And so when you really think about a business, it's not about the hard assets. It's not about the book value. It's about what is the value that's being created by this group of people who are working together to solve a problem. And that's the crux. It's the group of people. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's like those interpersonal dynamics are incredibly important. And that culture that already exists is what you're actually buying. And so you have to be able to step into that culture and adapt to it while also leading it, or the whole thing's just going to collapse.
We all grew up watching, I'm a little older than you. I grew up watching like Wall Street, right? And, when I first got into this space, it was a joke, because one of the guys I used to watch in the military with, his name's Kyle. I sent a message and I couldn't get a hold of him. So I told his wife, I got a hold of his wife. I said, hey, tell Kyle that Blue Horseshoe loves anaconda still. And he's like, what? I think that was the saying. I probably butchered it just then. But anyway, he texted me. He's like, what the hell? What you're watching Wall Street again? It's been a long time. I was like, no, I'm going to get into this space. And I thought that's what it was. It's like, I'm going to get into this space, but I'm not going to be one of those corporate raiders. I'm going to buy these businesses for zero down or low down, and, maybe a SBA loan here and there. And I have yet to see, maybe they're out there, but I have yet to see any company where their assets are worth more than they're asking for the company, right? Where you can go out and part it out and sell it for 5 different people, and you make 10 times what you paid for it. That is rarer than the unicorn zero down deal. So
yeah, that right there. I mean, you see that in distressed situations, and usually of larger companies they're experiencing massive amounts of distress, where you're like, okay, well, how can I break this apart and sell off the pieces for more than what the whole is worth? But again, we're not like at this size of the market, we're not looking at businesses like that. And even if you find the one that's distressed, well, that's 10 times worse. There's nothing there that's going to be valuable to break apart.
Yeah, I've met some guys out there, the John Ketleys of the world and some other people out there that are really good at doing turnaround. He doesn't even do turnarounds anymore. But I know some people out there that they are good at buying turnarounds. They know how to. And for him, it's lucky because he's in Europe and he gets to look at company's house. I don't know if you have to play with that at all. But yeah, in other countries, at least Europe, every company has to report their financials into the centralized database on a regular basis. So you get to see what they're really doing. There's a lot less of this, Wild West things that are going on here. That said, which there's part of me that says I wish we had that, and there's other part of me like I wish I don't, because they also you can't bootstrap things there like you can here. If you're insolvent, if you can't pay your bills that month, there's an insolvency court that can be called, and we'll pull the rug right underneath your idea. And I don't know how many businesses I've started where like I'm begging and borrowing and
it doesn't make sense until it makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, why am I even doing this? Like, I'm side hustling and selling things off and selling tools and special equipment to pay payroll that week or whatever, just to get by until it's up and running. You can't do that in a lot of countries because they really watch your solvency. Are you insolvent solvent or solvent. And that said, the space we're in now is, I don't want to discourage anybody. We've talked a lot about the buyer beware type of stuff here. There's real opportunity here, but you better work with right people. You better bring people onto your team that know this space. You better buy something that has some room for mistakes.
Yeah, one of the most valuable things you can do is buy the time and the expertise of a coach who's done it before, and not just done it before. I mean, done exactly what you're trying to do. Knows exactly the path you're going down. Has been down that path before. One of the things I always recommend is Jeff Sands. He's one of the top turnaround artists in the world, in the country at least. And he wrote Corporate Turnaround Artistry a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I recommend that book to every single business owner I meet, because I mean, I hope you're not going through distress, but if you want to learn how to really dive deep into your business and at a functional level, it's a fantastic guide for that.
Is he still around, or is it an older book?
No, it's the book just came out in, I think it's 2020 or 2021. He's still around, runs a firm based in Boston, I believe.
I'm gonna hunt him down and see if I can get him on here. I love talking to people like that, right? That's a specialized skill set too, and I have a lot of respect for this. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for guys who can do turnarounds and stuff. It's not everybody, right? And there's so much risk involved inside of that. But the guys that can do it, there's where there's great risk, there's great reward a lot of times. So you said Jeff Sands, right? I'm gonna look that up and hunt him down. So cool. How do people get a hold of you? We're running out of time here. We're getting at the top of the hour. If somebody wants to work with you and have you get them into the right business, or first of all, what services do you provide to these guys? And because I think we covered everything, all your history and everything else, but we really haven't told everybody what it is you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So what I do is I manage Sunset Coast Partners. It's an independent sponsor firm targeting defense acquisition businesses in the United States. And so I'm actively searching. I've got a couple of family offices and some high net worth professionals behind us, and we're looking to buy defense contractors. So if you or someone owns a business that does at least 40% revenue with the government, specifically in the Defense Department, I'd love to talk to you. But other than that, if you're a first-time searcher, this is a passion of mine. You see it on LinkedIn all the time. But reach out on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I try to respond to everybody within 24 hours. I do my best. And then beyond that, if you're looking for some guidance, I recently launched the Start Searching Challenge. And so I try not to do one-on-ones because I simply don't have time for it. But I do a challenge once a month. I've only done it twice so far. But I do it once a month. It's 1 to 2 hours an evening for 5 days. And we walk through, the 101 basics of how to actually search for a business to buy like a professional.
Okay, cool. So, and then what's the best way for them? Maybe you said it and I just missed it. What's the best way for them to get a hold of that information? Where do they find it?
Yeah, DM me on LinkedIn.
Okay, DM me on LinkedIn. All right. So I do know one person. We interviewed one person who bought a defense contracting company, and like I said, I'm insanely curious. I think I spent more time on that show with her, understanding her tech. They built GPS-less navigation devices that use fiber optics in a gyroscope type of thing, and it measures. They sense pulse of light, and by how it's the G forces applied to it, it stretches that microscopic fiber a certain way, and they can measure the how long it takes that light to travel, and that's how it determines. It was the most curious thing. Yeah, so they make these things by hand. It's a computer chip type of thing, but they have engineers and labs, and they pretty much make this thing on spiral, a little piece of fiber inside of this thing, and it's a defense contracting business. You can't have a guided missile reaching up to GPS saying, "Hey, where am I?" because it tells the world where it's at, right? So this thing can, once you give it a starting point and where you want it to go, it can keep it on track. But she bought that, and she's growing it now. I've had her on the show. She shows up once or twice. She showed up to our meetups and stuff. But I don't think I think maybe that might be the only defense contractor that I've actually had. Most of them are too big. So what's the...
Yeah, they tend to either be very small or very big.
Yeah. What's the price range you're looking at? The reason I told the whole story is to ask you what the price range was.
Yeah, typically 1.5 to 10 million EBITDA.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find those businesses where you've grown it just enough to kind of get out of the small business space, but you usually bump up against the NAICS code in your industry. And you're like, all right, well, can I even go this any higher? Or you need more investment capital, something like that.
Okay. And then the other question is, do you have any concerns right now with all the government funding cleanup and contracts and stuff. I've been telling a few of my friends that are looking for defense contracting jobs and things that even buy stuff, what do they call it, GSA or whatever, that they supply stuff through that. If more than 20 or 30% of your income comes from the government right now, beware, right? Because they're cutting spending, cutting costs, and a lot of these big fluffy contracts you think you're buying might get a haircut on them. So,
Yeah, they certainly might. There's a couple things I touch on with defense is, well, one, the DoD is one of the only organizations, probably the only one at this point that hasn't been impacted by budget cuts. I think there might have been like a services or consulting contract with Deloitte that was canceled, but beyond that, they're not experiencing the same impact, including with employees. And so, and I also have a lot of faith in the fact that 10 years from now, we're not going to noticeably have any real difference in defense spending, at least to the downside. So that's one. The second thing is, I think now is a good time to buy. There's a lot of fear in the market, especially if you're doing business with the government. You can imagine if you're a defense contractor who it's a family-owned business and you've grown it for several years, it's already harder to exit than it would be in the normal market. A lot of PEs don't like to get involved in defense work. So your list of buyers is already smaller, but now there's so much uncertainty that you're wondering if you're ever going to hit that exit. And so you might be more willing to bring on a liquidity partner at this point, take some chips off the table. So I think that's definitely an option, but there's a lot of uncertainty out there. That's for sure.
Yeah. I did talk to one lady who some of the stuff that you can get, like you can will run out, meaning that she did web development for like for the government. She would do the websites for the Food and Drug Administration and all these other places and stuff like that. And she had those big contracts. You see them canceling now. But her problem was is she was a disabled veteran and a female, so she got preferential treatment on bids. But a lot of these special preferential treatments only last for a certain period of time. So for her particular one, I think she had 3 or 5 years, and that had been gone. And now she's struggling to get by because she's competitively bidding against everybody else, and there's not enough room, right? So just understand, like if you're out there and you're thinking about jumping in this space, you can, work here with Jed and have him help you buy a company. There's some things you need to know about this industry, right? Some of these businesses, they can only sell to another veteran because they have so many preferred statuses because the veteran owned. That's how they get a lot of their contracts and stuff. So.
That's one of the most classic barriers that keeps people out of the government space is because you do get special treatment if you're service disabled veteran or you're a minority owned or a woman owned or you have AA classifications. Like there's a lot of things, and we're not even talking about if you have a clearance. And so there's a lot of things that can impact your ability to qualify for a contract. And so those are natural barriers that tend to keep people out of the space. Which for me, I mean, that's a great moat. It keeps the competitors out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. Well, I think we'll wrap this up. We'll call this a show and hang out for a few minutes afterwards.
All right. Thanks, Ron.